All right, so thank you very much for being here. I hope you had a nice lunch because now we have a triple triple function of in games. Mine's the video games, as you all know, this can get quite violent, all of them. You kill a lot of things in video games, and sometimes you also kill gods, you as the player or something. And in Japanese games, this happens quite a lot. The player character or the player, whatever you want to call them, ends up killing one god or several. This tends to give people unfamiliar with these games pause. Why does this happen so much and in so many games and in so many different kind of games? Well, if we take into account that a god is always stands for something, a symbol of something, then killing or destroying that god is also a very symbolic act. These games are very much aware of that and extensively use this as a sort of narrative device. So, in order to see exactly what kind of point these games are making, I brought you 3 of them. 2 very big names, one not so much, but still interesting. And that's what we'll see. But before that, however, before we get into games, we have to see exactly how in Japan, in modern Japan, it conceptualizes religious organizations, these centralized religious, specifically we have to talk about religious cults. And for that, I brought you 2 people. One of them being this one, Shoko Asahara. He was the leader of the Aum Shinrikyo cult, an extremely popular cult that got massive in the early 90s and late 80s. That was the perpetrator of the terrorist attack with sarin gas in the Tokyo subway in 1995, which left more than 1,000 people injured and I think 50 dead or so. And afterwards, this cult, they investigated a lot of what was going on, and they found a lot more instances of this sort of violence, both against enemies of the cult, which they consider enemies of the cult, and for people inside them as a sort of keeping them inside. And Asahara and a few others were sentenced to death for these attacks on the subway and executed in 2018. In 2019, in the 1st of January, a young man took his car and in order to protest this ruling, he rammed it in a crowd of passerbys. The other guy I have for you is this one. You probably saw him on the news, Tetsuya Yamagami. He is the man who shot and killed the ex-Prime Minister Shinzo Abe a while back. Now, Abe had ties to the South Korean far-right religious cult called the Unification Church, colloquially known better as the Moonies. This church, through some predatory donation practices, had bankrupted Yamagami's family. And so he, among other things, he killed Abe as revenge for that. But the point here is not the actual killing, it's the fact that this was a successful political assassination because it brought back these considerations of the effect cults have on families and in people back to the political sphere. And now politicians are actually considering dissolving this cult. So what we have here is a nation that has been very recently marked by these events of religious violence perpetrated by these sort of living gods. Asahara considered himself to be a new Christ, and as like a Christ, he demanded worship and all of that. And so that means that nowadays people in Japan are very much distrustful of this sort of religious organizations, because they have seen all the power they wield on their communities, all the repressive violence that they exert upon their own members and people outside of it. So with these ideas in mind and some others, we can take a look at what exactly these games that deal with extensively with religious figures in mythology and in other things are exactly doing. The first of these games is Dark Souls by From Software, 2011, one of the most influential games ever made. This is a very Western game in terms of aesthetics and presentation and such. The thing it does is that the world it creates, there was this original primordial power, the first fire, that from it spawned all the laws of nature, heat and cold and life and death, and also the souls of all living things. And in the setting of this world, the entities, people, whatever, that will later be called gods were the ones who got at the beginning of this time the most powerful souls of this, and used them to create their own world. And the chief god of these figures is this one. We saw him on the introduction cinematic of the game. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, a very grandiose title. What we see here is that the way this game elects to portray its gods is not in a religious manner. It's in a very noble manner, as members of the nobility, as a king. You see here, he has a crown, he has a bunch of soldiers at his command, he has thrones, he has castles, and the rule he exerts is one that is very much physical instead of the more esoterical things we expect gods to be related to. But the thing that Dark Souls does is that it doesn't set its game in this time frame. Instead, it elects for the game to happen at the very end of the world, a time when this primordial power is almost faded and everything is going to hell, basically. And as we learn in the game, as we go on in the game, what we see is how part of the reason why this decay came to was from this Gwyn person, God, holding on to this primordial power and trying to resurrect it time and time again, but failing, progressively failing, and basically holding on to this because it is what gives him power, and holding on to this until eventually it ends up being consuming him. In the way he actually appears in the game as a final enemy is very much not a very divine kind of creature, as a shriveled old man. So what this game is doing is portraying his divinity as very much as a social class, as a divine ruling class that is at the same time in this wish to uphold the power that they have from not inherently, but from this, stealing this primordial power of sorts, ends up being part of the reason why the world is going to hell. And this is why they say video games are escapism, because they are not realistic at all. And this kind of idea, this kind of the link between the political and the divine, is very much present in the games of this particular developer and this director. Happens in Bloodborne, happens in Sekiro, and most recently happens in the most popular game, Elden Ring. The figure you see here is a sort of similar to Gwyn. I won't go into it very much, but it's very significant how he looks like a broken statue brimming with power. I'll come back to this idea later, so have it in mind. For you to know as well, the background mythology for this game was created by George R.R. Martin, which makes it a pretty interesting collaboration between the two different kinds of fantasy works, East and West. So if you like his work, maybe you will also like this. So these games are very much, in the end, these gods you end up killing them, of course. This is a game, and this ends up being not only the death of this character, but also represent the death of their own, of each particular god's rule and of the world, and in a way, letting the world change into something else, or perhaps maybe end. And so we move on to the next game, the second one. First, we have to talk about this guy. This who is not very Japanese, Carl Gustav Jung from Switzerland. He was one of the most influential psychologists, and among the many things he said, two of them are important to us. One, you already know this, the collective unconscious, the idea that all the these unconscious minds of all people are connected for some manner, and that this esoterical space is populated by what he called the archetypes, the sort of building blocks of personalities, as well as all the mythologies of the world. This is why this is the way he explained that there were so many similarities across these mythologies. The other thing he said was that people in different social situations use different aspects of their personality that they show other people. This is what he called the persona. Persona in Latin means mask, and now you know why this game is called the way it is. Specifically, we're talking about Persona 5, the more recent installment, another game that is absolutely inescapable in gaming discourse. Very different from Dark Souls, very anime, but also quite similar, as you will see. And what this game series does is it takes these Jungian ideas and builds this urban fantasy setting that takes the collective unconscious and makes it a space that can actually be accessed. And in this and in this collective unconscious that is influenced by people and in turn influences people, it's populated by creatures from all the mythologies of the world. And if a physical person accesses this place, they can awaken their persona, their mask, their aspects of their personality in the form of a creature of mythology, of literature, and such. And in this specific game, what we see is that the characters of the game discover this space and realize they can use it to manipulate people outside. So they decide that they are going to use it to expose the crimes and the bad things that people in power do, these abuses of power. Many things happen. This is a very long game, like 100 hours. The final bad guy that they fight is this populist politician running for the seat of prime minister. That, as we see in the game, is actually has a very clearly fascist tendencies. He talks about bringing back the glory of Japan, which, of course, in the Japanese political context, refers to going back to the time of the empire. This is the main idea of the Nippon Kaigai, which is an ultra-nationalist lobbying group that has many of its members in office. Among them being our friends who were killed a while back, Shinzo Abe, and a big idea, that these people propose is changing the constitution of Japan to one of the articles of the constitution states that Japan cannot have an army. This was one of the requirements for the surrender after World War II. So these ultranationalists, these imperialists, are very much trying time and time again to change this and to remilitarize Japan, without any success, thankfully, but that's what they do. Anyway, the mythological point here is that even after they take down this politician, Shido, people don't actually care. People are still willing to vote for him. He's still extremely popular. And so they go to the characters, go to the collective unconscious again, and they find that this sort of ambient of political apathy had created this entity, Yaldabaoth, that was in turn keeping people uninterested in every of these things. Yaldabaoth is actually the name of a few Gnostic sects called the Demiurge. Gnosticism was a collection of religious ideas that coalesced in the 1st century AD, among early Christian and Jewish sects. And the main idea of this religion was that the creator of the material world was not the actual God, the real God, but rather a sort of imposter who had taken over this divine power. And according to some of these sects, he was a malevolent deity that was a tyrant who demanded worship, despite that power not being the one of the true God, believing itself to be a God. This is how they explained that question at the heart of so much religion. If God is good, then why is there so much evil in the world as well? Well, this is how they said it, by saying that this God was hidden behind this other one. And this is why I chose this particular game to bring here, because this structure in which we see first a realistic threat in the form of this politician, realistic, a normal person basically, is then followed by an esoterical threat in the form of a god that serves as an allegory of that. In the same manner that this fascist politician wants power for himself and in dominion of the country, we use a god whose whole point is being a tyrant who demands power despite not being rightfully his. And so the fact that both this politician and both this entity end up getting destroyed is very much a rejection of that, of those fascist ideas. Okay. And as a little bit of extra, I thought I would I will show you how this one of the personas of the members of this group is Loki, of the persona belonging to the to the traitor of the group. I won't tell you who it is. And these zebra-like markings that you see here are not actually referring to the animal, but rather to this type of camouflage that was used in World War I in ships. That's all camouflage that was used to misdirect the enemy, to make it more difficult for the others to know where the ship was heading. So this is very much a use of this technology as a sort of symbol of how Loki in Norse mythology is a trickster god who is always trying to betray people, and it's also the usage of this god in turn is also a reference to this person who uses this character. And speaking about military technology, the next game is not fantasy but rather science fiction. It's Combat 7, Skies Unknown, by Project Exis, 2019. The smaller scale game in this one. And these are all games. This game city is all about fighter planes and very over-the-top action and all of that, and epic duels and all of that. What they do is they take place in a made-up world that is very much similar to our real one, but with the level of technology pushed a bit further. This is a way of interacting with the technological anxieties of all of each time that the games were made in. And in the case of this game, the main thing is very much worried about the ethicality of the use of drones in warfare, the use of AI as well. There's a very big topic right now in all spheres about AI. Not so much about the use of drones, but this was very much, as you will remember, a very big topic back then owing to the US Army's started using drones and such. And so the story of the game goes that this war begins between these two countries for energy resources. One of these countries starts using a lot of drones for the first time in this setting, promising a clean war because these are very advanced drones that can target specific things and keeping casualties to a minimum. As we get to see as the game progresses, this war ends up being anything but clean. Things degenerate further and further, and at the end, everything that happens in this kind of story happens. The thing that always happens in this kind of story happens. The drones go wild, and people from both countries have to put a stop to them. So it's a fairly simple story, but if we take a look at how these drones are constructed, we see that there are plenty of religious and mythological references that are very much significant. One of them is how who created these drones, being one of them one scientist that was previously affiliated with what is in this world a sort of analog to Nazi Germany, and the way this person used the combat data of this one ace pilot in order to train these drones to be better at killing. Mihaly serves as a sort of rival to the player character in this game. As we see in the game, he was the crown prince of this old annexed nation that was conquered by the country he now serves. And the thing about Mihaly is the name Mihaly, Mihail, the pronunciation in the game, I don't know how it's actually pronounced, is the Hungarian form of Michael. His call sign as a pilot is Archange. And in this grand final climactic duel that happens, of course, between the player and Mihaly, the background music that plays is also called the same, and the lyrics in Latin are very much a prayer made to the skies. Of course, skies, a pilot, this guy. This duel that happens in the old ruins of this old annexed country. So what we see here is that he's very much likened to the Archangel Michael of Christian, Abrahamic religion. The protector of heaven, who casts down the devil, who fights in the great war against the forces of evil and such. So in this case, it's very much deificating this soldier that is very much carrying this this old nationalistic idea of the wish for independence of his old country, and being very much likened to this protector angel by the people that are affiliated to this country. The other, very strong, very powerful musical presence in all of these games, but we don't really have time for all of them. And the other thing is that the final enemies in the game that you fight against, these super advanced drones that you have to take down before they fuck up everything. Sorry about that, very an academic language. Are called Hugin and Munin. These are names from Norse mythology, and they are the twin ravens that each day fly around the world and bring back news and information to Odin. Now, the thing that makes Odin a special god in terms of worldwide mythology is that he's very much defined not really by pure power, but rather by knowledge, by how he uses trickery and his own cunning in order to obtain more power. Many of the myths surrounding him are all about tricking other deities or whatever, and getting new forms of magic or knowledge that will serve to enforce his rule. And I think this game is very much taking that into account. These drones are very much, the AI of these drones was created by these two icons of nationalism, of violent nationalism, of soldiers that are elevated into a form of godhood. They are carrying this kind of information into the future as a way of, in the same way the Hugin and Munin mythology bring information to Odin to reinforce his rule. These drones are also metaphorically carrying these nationalistic ideas in the future. And so the fact that you actually end up destroying these drones by members of both of these nations is a very idealistic and optimistic way of also rejecting that violent nationalism that gave rise to this war and so many others, as well as bringing some ideas about the ethics of the use of AI in the technological realm. Tech companies often say that artificial intelligence is all unbiased and it's the key to being very fair. You can trust the AI, the algorithm, because it's not human and it's very calculated. But as many people have always said, all of these technological constructions are carrying with them the biases and the ideas of the people who make them. So in this case, in the use of warfare, it is also very much carrying all the nastiness of a real war. So 3 games that, as you have seen, are all very different from each other in terms of everything, gameplay, story, tone, whatever, style. But they all focus on this sense of divinity as being part of political control, of political power, of soldiers, of fighters, of violence made in order to enforce some sort of rule, some sort of society. And as well, if you have also paid attention a little bit to the way these entities look, you will see that they are very often represented as machines, as artificial constructs. There is Yaldabaoth looks like a sort of robot. You have the drones. You have Radagon as a statue, in the form of allegorically displaying this as being displaying these divinities as being creations by human hands. A very atheistic notion, the creation of gods being created by people, that is taken to a literal extreme in these games, and how these creations of people in turn serve to enforce their own rules that are meant to be allegorically representative of some other oppressive sort of political rule. But also that despite of these entities' portrayal or how they portray themselves as absolute and unquestionable, they end up falling into human hands. They can be destroyed. Because at the end of the day, these games are not about killing a god. They are about killing the idea that is represented by the god, the idea that these absolute constructions of society can be changed and can be eliminated. And so, I thought I would, we are running out of time. I thought I would end this presentation, since we're all from comparative studies, not with a game, but with a rather disturbing painting. This is called, oh my God, Deification of a Soldier by Kikuji Yamashita, 1967. Yamashita was a conscript in the Imperial Japanese Army and fought in the Second Sino-Japanese War. Here, when he was part of the unit he was part of, tortured and buried alive a Chinese prisoner of war. This sort of thing stuck with him the whole time for his whole life, and became a very politically motivated painter afterwards, also dealing extensively with the American occupation of Japan. And I think we can see everything we talk about is the interaction between the divine and the power of a military, all in the pursuit of violence. Also very clearly displays the idea of God as a sort of in a grotesque manner, in a way that is very much not a positive way. And I also wanted to talk a bit about this place, but I fear that since we started a little bit late, we can really talk about this. To give some more historical context into why these things happen, and more information into the interaction between modern Shinto religion and imperialist thought, modern imperialist thought, but we don't really have time for this, so if you are interested, you can ask me later if you want. That will be all, so thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it.